against a public figure when the standard is so impossible to meet. This email, which is being ignored by the mainstream media, is the type of thing that would be front page on the New York Times if this were done in regards to a book that targeted for ruination a liberal politician.
Do you mean that? Do you mean that?
Do I mean what?
Do you think that
if this was a Michelle Obama book in which a right-wing author, let's just say Andrew Breitbart, decided to move into Hyde Park before the
or Corsi or Joe Corsi,
right, to live across the way,
right.
And an email came in that in essence said, and here let me frame what the email is. It's an email that was crafted after the manuscript was handed in by the author Joe McGinnis to Random House to be legally vetted. The lawyers communicate, according to the email, the lawyers communicate to Joe McGinnis that he's dealing with tawdry and unsubstantiated gossip in the primary lurid accusations in the book. And he reaches out to the lowliest of lowly sources, an Alaskan blogger whose obsession is on the paternity of Trig Palin.
Wow.
We call them the Trig Truthers, and Andrew Sullivan has ruined his career.
Ruined his career. A one-time really great writer who just tattooed himself.
And his obsession.
Yep.
And the email is written in a tone to this primary source
of
his.
But let our audience know, when you say Trig Truthers, what are those people? For people who don't
know. They
know,
believe that Sarah Palin is not the mother of Trig Palin. And there's no basis in this. And it's just insanity. and the thing is that Joe McGinnis says as much.
Right.
Yet he still includes it in his book. And in this email to this low-level source who's a blogger, and you can really piece together that the book that he was supposed to be so heavily reported is basically a hodgepodge of stuff that had been written on Alaska blogs by far left-wing Sarah Palin haters, none of whom could come to him with the goods. And the proof of that is that the email states that. He says that there's a lot of wishful thinking out there, people who have been hurling unfounded accusations that add up to nothing more than tawdry and unsubstantiated gossip. And after he hands in his book, he begs and pleads with this blogger,
because the lawyers have come back to him and said, this is vicious gossip and tawdry charges.
Right.
You've got to do more reportage.
Right, and he basically says, you need to give me the goods. You keep stating that around the corner there's going to be verified truths behind this, but I cannot find this. I need you now in this late hour, what I would call overtime. The book's been handed in.
Right.
And it is an absolute proof positive, especially when 5 of the 6 accusations, the tawdry gossip, are put into the book. And that will bring in my minder, Joel Pollack, the editor-in-chief, Breitbart.com, who's read...
If you thought Andrew Breitbart was weaponized before, now that Andrew Breitbart's actually going to have some facts, he's going to be unbelievable. Totally weaponized. Let's go to that. This thing, what Andrew's talking about, in this email between the blogger and Joe McGinnis, he lists out 6 major areas of concern by obviously the legal staff of Random House. And what were those, Joel?
Well, he says, I can just quote from the email. He says, no one has ever provided factual evidence that, A, Todd had sex with a hooker or with anyone else outside his marriage. B, Sarah had an affair with Brad Hansen or anyone else.
By the way, for the listener, these are all charges made in the book. Keep going.
C, Track was a druggie who enlisted in the Army to avoid a jail term, or that he vandalized Wasilla school buses. D, Willow was involved in the vandalism of the empty house in Meadow Lakes, or that Sarah rushed back from Hawaii to put the lid on that. E, Trig is not Sarah's natural-born child. F, Bristol was promiscuous as a high schooler and drank and used drugs or became pregnant again after Tripp's birth. A, B, C, D, E, F.
Now, he's admitting he does not have in this email. He's admitting no factual evidence.
And he's going to a low-level blogger who got fired from his kindergarten job because of the type of blog that he was running and some type of admission at that blog about his can I say?
No, there were some issues with this blogger, I think.
There's some issues about onanism in this blogger, and so he was
not a card-carrying member of the Man Boy Love Association, but there were some issues.
No,
there were some issues.
But this is a guy at the last second who's clearly a primary source, who's already blown his load, as it were, on his blog, okay, with all of these lurid details.
By the way, for the listening audience, that was a metaphor.
So he's okay, but the thing is, it's who he's pleading to. He's pleading to the lowest level guy who's clearly his primary source, whose sole goal is to use a blog in Alaska to defame and defile Sarah Palin. That is the basis of these lurid details. This guy cannot prove it, and what he's given to Random House is such an embarrassment. Random House now is finding out that the great Joe McGinnis went up there and met with a bunch of low-rent bloggers and cobbled together the best of their wishful thinking
a Sports Center highlight reel of.
I think that she killed. I think that she was behind the Kennedy assassination type people up in the hinterlands.
Well, Joel, how many of those actually made it into the book?
So 5.5 made them into the book.
5.5 of the 6 made him into the book.
Now, what's interesting is that there's no evidence after January 2011, which is when the email was sent, until the time the book was published. There's no new evidence he's come up with to substantiate those 5.5
or
out of 6.
They would have been in the book.
How are those accusations sourced, generally speaking?
So when he has a quote, he says, "A friend says," or "someone who knew Todd Palin at the time said."
Right.
But what's interesting is, in the case of every single allegation that made it into the book, his source is the National Enquirer or some other tabloid, plus these unsubstantiated quotes. He does not provide anything beyond what he had in January 2011 when he said there's no factual evidence. Now, he admitted that he sent this email, and he said to Mediaite, well, I did some additional reporting after January 2011, and then he told Slate.
Let's talk about this on Mediaite and Slate are the two that he went to.
Right.
By the way, do you think the sphincter muscles were tightening a little bit in corporate headquarters at the Random House Tower when they saw this email?
I think what they did was they told him, you have nothing to prove these allegations, so as long as you cite the National Enquirer or something, we think you're legally safe.
But why did he go? He went to Mediaite in Slate.
So he goes to Mediaite after Andrew's post about the email. He says to Mediaite, well, yes, that email is real, but I actually did some new reporting after January 2011. So we said, okay, what is the new reporting?
If he did new reporting, it should be in said book.
Right.
Correct?
So then he goes to Slate, and Slate publishes some emails he released to Slate. And the only emails he releases are the ones back and forth between Joe McGinnis and the woman who's a self-admitted prostitute who was claiming to have had some connection with Todd Palin. And he releases these emails saying, you see, I did extra research. I showed that this woman was not to be trusted, and therefore I left that out of the book. But he doesn't say why the 5.5 out of the 6 made it into the book if there was no news evidence. There's no proof that he did any new research into those allegations, aside from sending out SOS messages to bloggers.
Because it's certainly not in the book as is currently construed. We're going to come back after the break, and we're going to talk about the bigger picture, Andrew, about the 2008 election.
It is a bit. This is a very big story on its face, but it's much bigger as what it relates to what we are going to do to police the media in the coming election cycle.
Andrew Breitbart, Tribune of the People, will return on the Victory Sessions with Stephen K. Bannon in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Talk Radio 790, KABC.
You're listening to the Victory Sessions with Stephen K. Bannon, powered by Victory Film Group.
This is Stephen K. Bannon, the Victory Sessions, KABC 790 AM, home of the Los Angeles Dodgers. I am back with Andrew Breitbart, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Breitbart.com, his new Editor-in-Chief and Minder, Joel B. Pollack, and the lovely Airman Julia Pollack, up from North Island. Andrew, by the way, we're getting tweets, we're getting texts. We just got oh my God, I love Andrew for president. That's scary. That shows you how fluid the 2012 election cycle is.
Kane Breitbart. I need some experience in politics before I can go for the top slot.
Herman Cain is a good man, but I don't know if he could be your minder. I think that might be too much. I want to cut. We're going to get onto the bigger issues we talked about with Andrew Breitbart about the meaning and context of this. And we know we've got a lot of people listening and a lot of people calling in. Our number is 800-222-KABC or 800-222-5222. Joel, since it's come out,
this being the email.
Being the email, the whole controversy about the author of The Rogue. I refuse to mention his name on air. The author of The Rogue, which is kind of an open sewer of just unsubstantiated charges.
I have a name for him. Okay. Because think about this. He sends out.
I'm of Irish descent, so be easy on this. Be easy on this.
He sends out an email in which he admits that the lawyers at Random House say he doesn't have the goods. Right. Okay? Let's just call him Sloppy Joe.
Sloppy Joe.
Because this is about as sloppy as it humanly gets. And you can imagine Random House is thinking to himself, oh my God, we may have to give over the building in Germany to a woman, to this heathen, to this cultural heathen in Wasilla.
Joe, you mentioned right before we went on break that you've noticed that even some of the more progressive shows are looking like they're dropping McGinnis.
Because of this. First of all, nobody in the mainstream media except for Slate and Mediaite have even reported on this explosive email. Look, in New York, they are obsessed with media.
Yeah.
They are obsessed with the book world.
Yeah.
This was supposed to be one of the big books by a big author
the fall season,
at
right?
Random House, and he launched this salacious book. This Kitty Kelly has even denounced this book, yet Matt Lauer has this thug on. Would Matt Lauer allow for me, if I moved in next door to Katie Couric and came in with the Katie Couric tell-all book that went into who she slept with in college, do you think that Matt Lauer would allow for me to sit there on the Today Show couch? This was a big deal for the mainstream media to take her down, and we dropped the bomb. And it's one of those things. If a tree drops in the forest and there's nobody there to hear it, then explain to me why Joe McGinnis is now saying that he's been dropped from Joel Pollak.
Well, he says he was dropped from Terry Gross.
NPR.
He's dropped from NPR.
Fresh. Is that fresh chicken or something?
Fresh Air, Terry Gross.
Right?
Fresh Air, Terry Gross dropped Joe McGinnis on as a guest?
NPR dropped him. Morning Joe dropped him off MSNBC.
Morning Joe.
Keith Olbermann dropped him off Current TV. And
by the way, Keith Olbermann and Bill Maher on the show the week before both denounced the book. Both said that the book was, I believe, on his show. So this was after the Janet Maslin review.
How on earth do you lose Keith Olbermann and Rachel Maddow in an anti-Palin book?
Yeah.
Well, and Bill Maher. How do you lose
Random
the
House.
trifecta?
This is Random House, folks. This is what we are up against as a nation. We have these corporations out there who are politically active and have a contempt for the American people, and they've had contempt for the American people for much longer than we actually know. And their output has reflected it. And this was meant to be the definitive takedown of Sarah Palin.
Yes.